Good evening. Today's daf is daf mem vav. We are going to begin the new perek, Sher Shenogach. Now, we explained the Mishnah and daf tezvav. We explained the halachas of the 5 mu'adim when they damage a balei chayim. Now our Mishnah is going to explain other dinim, other mu'adim which are not balei chayim. For example, a beid or a eish. And that's going to be the primary part of this perek. The next perek is going to speak about eish. But beforehand, the Mishnah is going to tell us about shei, which damages when it comes into the chatzar v'chavere, which are really shaykh to the next perek. Okay. Now the Mishnah says like this: Sher shenagach hasapara. If a case of a sher tam, which we said, a sher that gored a cow, and it killed the cow. The ox killed the cow. What happened? Nimtzu ubara betzida. But you have now the cow had a fetus, had a child, and the cow, this fetus is dead. So what's the problem? You don't know whether the cow gave birth before the ox gored it, and now the fetus that died, it's unrelated to the actual goring. Or in mishenikha yolda, or maybe it gave birth after the ox gored it, and the fetus died on account of the goring. It's a suffix. So what's the din now? This guy claims the part is going to say, yeah, this part was about to have a child, and because of the negicha of your ox, it killed the child as well. So the din is like this. First of all, he has to pay a chatzi nezek to the owner of the para. Why? Because this shade is a tam, and the tam damage, he has to pay a chatzi nezek. He has to pay half the value. Now, urevi nezek levlad, but he has to pay 25%, 1/4 of the cost of the damage for the child. Since it's a suffix whether the shade was responsible for the death of this child, in which case you would have to pay half the damage. So its owner only has to pay half the amount of the fetus that he would ordinarily be required to pay, which is 1/4. So that's the first din. So the din is, you don't know if the share killed the uber as well. Maybe it got killed before the share was nagach lepara. So since it's a suffix, so at least for the ox that killed the para, which we know for sure that happened, he has to pay a chatzi nezek, but since it's a suffix, according to the Bava Kamah, he only pays, but for the vlad, a 25%. Now, here's a din of interesting case, the next part of the Mishnah, which doesn't really happen, but v'chein para shenogchas asher v'nimtza vlad b'tzida. Now here, the exact opposite. The para, the cow, gored the shade, gored the ox, and v'nimtza vlada b'tzida. And now the cow's newborn offspring was found on the side, either it was dead or alive. Now, v'ein yadua imat shlei nogcha yolda. You don't know whether the cow gave birth before it gored the ox, or mishenikha yolda, or whether the cow gave birth after it gored. Now, what's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is when damage caused by a sher tam, we know the liability of the chiyuv is miguf of the one who gored. So take the example, the case of the para. This cow that gored the shade, if we're evaluating it as it would have a child already, so that means it's worth a lot more, which means that the shade which was damaged, his chatzi nezek could be worth a lot more because he could take from the goof of the shade. Mashenkin, if it was born before it gored, so then he's capped, the chatzi nezek is capped only by, a chatzi nezek is only capped by the actual shade and nothing to do with the tzida.
Before or after?
If it was born before it gored, so it comes out, the gufa, it comes out, it's much less. So what's the din? Mishtalim chatzi nezek min hapara. So he pays a chatzi nezek from the para, and a reviz nezek min vlad, and 1/4 of the cost of the damage paid from the vlad. So again, since it's a suffix, whether the vlad was part of the cow at the time the cow gored, the owner pays only half of what it would pay if it was certain that it was part of the cow. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel says, our Mishnah is Udurei Simchis. This is the opinion of the statement of Sumchis. The Omar says that whenever you have mammon hamutal b'safik, whenever you have property of uncertain ownership, so it's mammon, which is mutal b'safik, you don't know who the money belongs to, so the halacha is chelkin, you divide by the two parties. So our Mishnah also, since it's a suffix, you don't know about the uber b'tzida when this happened, so we divide it. The Chacham say no. Zeh klal godel badin. There's a great principle when it comes to halachas of money, that hamaitzi mechavere olav araya, that the burden of proof rests upon the person who's claiming it. And according to the Chachamim, in cases of uncertainty in the Mishnah, no payment is made for the fetus or from the offspring unless you know for sure. So in the case, let's say you take a shesh nagach as a part of an imtza ubra betzida, and you don't know when did it come from the para, did it come from the sheir, or maybe it came from beforehand. So the owner of the para now wants to extract money from the owner of the sheir. He has to bring proof. There's no such a thing as yachleikum. So therefore, our Mishnah says that the divided must be sumchas. So the Gemara asks, why do I need to say the words, this is a significant principle in halachas of money? Why not just state the klal? Just say, why do you have to preface and say, zaklal godel badin? So the Gemara answers and says, itzrach. It's necessary for Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel to say this, or why? It's needed. Because even over here, if the one who was injured states, I am certain that such and such occurred, and the one liable for the damage says, perhaps it was otherwise, he's not refuting the claim, he says, nevertheless, we still say although the nizek, the injured party, claims with certainty that he is correct, and the defendant claims that it's speculative, the definite claim still does not render the defendant liable to pay because he has no proof. Inami, alternatively, and that's what it says, Zakla Godel Badin. Alternatively, you could say that L'chihada Itmar was necessary in a case, it was stated like this: a person who sells an ox to another, and the ox is found to be a gorer. So Rav says, it's a mistaken transaction, since the purchaser can claim that he bought the ox specifically for work, and he doesn't want to have an ox that gores. Shmuel says, Shmuel says the seller can say to the buyer, I sold it to you for shchita. And the fact that it gores is not my issue. So that's what he means. Zekla Godel Badin. So either Zekla Godel Badin is either when the Nizik says bari. Second answer is that over here, in the case of Hamecher Sher Lechavedai, V'nimtza Nakchon, so then you have the machlekes of Rav and Shmuel. Now, so Gemara asks, why are Rav and Shmuel speculating about the purpose of the sale? What are they saying? They're saying, V'nimtza Nakchon, so now it's a machlekes. If it's a Mekach Toys, Shmuel says the seller could tell him, or the buyer could say, the seller could tell him, I sold it to you to Shecht. Why do I need to have this machlekes? Why don't we see if the purchaser is a person who buys oxen for plowing or a person who buys oxen for shchita? See clearly, if he bought it for plowing, so then he can say that I did not buy a goring ox. And if he bought it for shchita, so why is that a machlekes? So the Gemara answers and says, it's not necessary for them to have this machlekes only in the case of begavra the zavin laholaha, person who buys oxen for this and for this reason. So it's unclear for which purpose he was intended. The Gemara asks, "V'nichsi demei the deal or the deal." Let us see what the purchase price was. If he paid the price of an ox fit for plowing, which, as the Mefarshim say, is a lot. It's a lot larger. It's a larger amount. So then you could assume that l'redia was intended for plowing. But if you paid a lower price, so mepashtus is for shchita, so l'nichsisa, then it was sold for shchita. So my answer is talking about a case where the cost of meat rose, the price of meat rose, and it stands at basically the same price of the plowing. So you don't know. So now Shmuel and Rav and Shmuel have machlekes whether the purchaser can claim that the transaction was made b'tois, or whether the seller can claim to him that he sold it for shchita, and the purchaser has to provide that it wasn't sold for shchita. Amri the Chacham said, but if the loss of the purchaser cannot be reimbursed from the purchasing money by returning it, let's say, for example, the guy bought the shade, and now he can't reimburse him. Let's say he spent the money already. So now, let the purchaser, let the kohen take the ox in lieu of the money. The Amri Inshis, people say, in other words, allow yourself to be repaid from the debt, even in bran, since anything can be used to pay a chayv. In the event that the seller has no money with which to reimburse the purchaser, even if it's a mistaken transaction, the result may be that the purchaser keeps the ox instead of returning the money. So there will be no practical difference between the opinion of Rav and Shmuel. What's Rav and Shmuel saying? Mekach tois, and right. So if we're talking about that he doesn't have money to pay him back, so let him just take the ox. So my answer is like tzricha the ikalish talumi minei. Machlekes is whether the seller, where the seller does not have sufficient funds from where to repay the purchaser, and now the koine demands that the money be returned as opposed for keeping the ox's payment. Now Rav Omar Mekach Tois. Rav says in this case it's a Mekach Tois because zil basar ruba. Go after the majority. Ruba de inoshe l'rdiyahu dezavni. The majority of people buy oxen for plowing. Shmuel Omar. Shmuel says Yachol she'emer le'ei. Shmuel says the seller can say to him, "L'shchita machartiv lach." I sold it to you for shchita, but lo yaslina basaruba, and we do not follow the majority in this case. Ki yaslina basaruba. When do we follow the majority according to Shmuel? Be surah, only determining iser. When it comes to monetary, such as this case, lo yaslina basaruba, we do not go after the reiv. Rather, we say the burden of proof rests upon the claim. Tanya Ma'achi, we learned also a brisa. If an ox that gores a cow and the fetus is found dead at its side, and you do not know whether it gave birth before the ox gored or it gave birth after the ox gored, so the halakha is mishalim chatzi nezek lapara. You pay half the cost of the damage for the cow, or the nezek vlad, and 1/4 of the cost of damage for the offspring. These are the words of Sumches. From where do we know that the svara of Ameitzi Mechavel Varaya? So Shinamar, he says, when Moshe appointed Aaron and Chor to judge the people, he said, Mi Baal Dvar Mi Gashalem. Whoever has a cause, let them come near. What do we learn from here? Yagish Raya Aleim, that he meant to say whoever has a claim against another should yagish, submit proof to them. So what do we see from here? The pasuk clearly says that if somebody is claiming from the other person, he has to bring a raya. Why don't you have a pasuk svadu? It's a logical reason. The one who suffers the pain, also goes to the doctor. Just as an individual with a problem has a responsibility to resolve it, so too someone with a claim against another has to bring a raya to his claim. So it makes a lot of sense. What do we know by the Inteda? That we first listen to the Tevea, to the person who claims first. Remember, like it says, Mi bal dvarim yigash aleim. Whoever has a cause, let them come near. In other words, yagish dvarim aleim, which means that whoever has a claim against the other should submit his claim to them first. So whenever you have a plaintiff and a defendant, al pi halacha, the plaintiff goes first. Now, Nadai says, sometimes we listen to the defendant first. When his assets are depreciating because of the claim against him, in that situation, the Beis Din allows him to present his arguments first so that he can sell his assets at the true price. The Mishnah says, that's what the Mishnah said, that if an ox scores an ox, a cow gores an ox, so then the cow's newborn offspring found on its side, so half the cost of the damage is paid from the cow, and a quarter of the cost of the damage is paid from the offspring. So the Gemara says, Palgan iskahu de boy l'shlumi. The Mishnah's words, mashma, that the owner of the cow pays half of the damage, and Palgan iskahu de boy l'shlumi, he pays half the damage, and an additional 1/4 of the cost of the damage. So the Gemara says, Kula niskei nechi rivoy ma'avidite. He is required to pay only half the cost of the damage, since it's a sher tam. The Mishnah says that he pays 75% of the cost of the damage. Why? So Rabbi says, Chatzi nezek, half the cost of the damage is echad ma'arba b'nezek, actually means 1/4 of the cost of the damage. Since there are two animals that may have had this incident, the owner of the cow pays only half of the normal amount from the value of the cow, 1/4 of the cost of the damage. Revi nezek, the other half of the damage, which was 1/4 of the cost of the damage, echem mishmei nezek, 1/8 of the cost of the damage. Therefore, the owner of the ox receives a total of 3/8 of the cost of the damage. The Gemara says, "V'i paro vlad dechad nino." But if the cow and the offspring are owned by one person, hachanami dematziyam lebal paro. So then the injured party can indeed say to the owner of the cow, "Mimanavshach." Whichever way you look at it, chatzi nezek havli. You have to give me half of the damage, either from the value of the cow or from the newborn, which belonged to you. So why is it necessary to give half of the payment specifically from the cow and half from the newborn? Rather, the case is necessary, the part of the chad or vlad b'chad, where the cow belongs to one person and the offspring to another. So that each can claim that he is only partially responsible for the damage. The Gemara says, but even in the case, if the injured party came forward and claimed payment from the owner of the cow first, he can indeed say to the owner of the cow, your cow certainly caused damage to my property. Bring me proof that you have a partner. The owner of the cow would have to prove that the newborn calf was still a fetus at the time, and therefore a shutav in the incident.
Today you have cameras.
Exactly. Today you have cameras. In order to pater himself from paying the entire amount or half the cost of the damage. Ella the kodem tavi lebal vlad chila. Rather, we're talking about whether he claimed the payment from the owner of the offspring first, as in the case of the owner of the cow can say to him, the Amalei can say, "Galas dadaitich tafi islay." You disclose your opinion that I have a partner who's responsible for the first part of the damage. Therefore, I'm not prepared to pay the full amount required, half of the damage of the cost, but only half of the amount, 1/4. Other people say, "Afagav the kodem tavi lebal para tchila." Even though the injured party came forward and claimed payment from the owner of the cow first, matzi medachile, he can dismiss and the Amalei can say, I know that I have a partner in this matter, the owner of the newborn calf. Rabbi says, did it say 1/4 of the cost of the damage or 1/4 of the cost of the damage? The Mishnah clearly says that it was half of the cost of the damage and 1/4 of the cost of the damage. Rabbi says, actually the Mishnah is referring to a case where the cow and its offspring belong to one person. And this is what we're saying. If the cow is here, he pays half the cost of the damage from the para. And if the cow is not here, then he pays 1/4 of the cost of the damage. It's reimbursed from the blood. Now the Gemara says, what's the reason why he pays 1/4 of the cost is because we don't know about it. Because we don't know if the offspring was with it when the cow gored or whether or not. Eloi have, but if it's obvious that the offspring was not there, I will eat pshita lan. Let me read again. Time didn't have a vlad bahade kinachi Eloi have. I will eat pshita lan to have a vlad bahade kinachi. But if it's obvious to us that the offspring was with it as the fetus when it gored, the full amount of half the cost of the damage may be reimbursed from the offspring from the vlad if the cow is not there. Where it says Rava Latame, Rava goes according to his reasoning. Rava says Parasha Zikai. In the case of a cow that caused damage while pregnant, gave him a vladtai, the injured party collects compensation from his offspring. So in other words, the offspring that had been a fetus at the time of the goring. My time, what's the reason? Because gufahi, it's considered an integral part of the body and therefore may be used to collect payment. However, Tanagela Shazike, if a hen that caused damage, so then Aina gave him a bitasa. The injured party does not collect compensation from its eggs. Payment can be collected only from the body of the hen. My time, because Pirsha Bamu, the egg is simply the baitza is not part of the goof. It's just like separated from the goof. It's not a chelik of the goof, and therefore it's not an integral part of the body, and therefore it does not collect from the baitza. Atkan.